All right, normally whenever I do this particular topic, it's about a 5 or 6 hour training. So we're going to try to cover as much material as we possibly can in a very short 1 hour period of time. Um, if we do run out of time, I may schedule a second session on this particular topic so that I can make sure that we cover everything that we need to cover on this particular area. And when we talk about dealing with aggression, of course, the main focus here is with the children that we work with in our classroom. But all of the material that we'll be talking about today is also applicable to not only the children, but adults that you may work with, parents that you work with, even your own personal family, your spouses, your children, etc. It all works the same way. And we've got to keep in mind that every single one of us, we all have the same amount of aggression that sits within our body. Some people say, well, that may not be true. Some people are more aggressive than others. We actually all have the same amount of aggression. Most of us are able to keep our aggression right here in our brains, all right? And we don't act on our aggression. So that's the thing that we've got to look at is there's certain people that are able to regulate their aggression and there's certain people that act on their aggression. All of us have inner thoughts. We have that voice that constantly speaks to us inside of our mind, okay? We've got to keep in mind that with children up until the age of 7 or 8, children do not have an inner voice, okay? Children only see images. It's like watching a movie with no sound, all right? So a lot of times when an adult tells a child, you go over there and you sit down and you think about what you've done, the child, they can't think. They can see images of what they've done, but they don't have that inner voice that is talking to them, that is coaching them, that is helping them regulate aggression. The only thing they can do is act on it. So I know that we've talked about this in previous webinars and previous trainings. We've talked about inner voice, but I wanted to start off today by talking about that and just bringing that up once again and reminding everyone, we all have unmet needs, okay? And so when you see a child that is aggressive, when you see an adult that is aggressive, that is a sign of an unmet need, okay? And they're acting out in order to try to fill that void. Now, the challenging part for us as early educators is that, we don't know what that unmet need is. The parent may not know what the unmet need is. The child may not know. And so you've always got to keep that in mind, that it is our job as advocates, it is our job as teachers and caregivers to try to pinpoint that unmet need so that we can fill it and help the child regulate their aggression. You have a handout that I included on the webinar. If you were able to download those and print those off, that's fantastic. If you were not able to download those and print it off, no big deal. You can just take notes as we go along. But I kind of gave you 3 different rules and then 7 beliefs that we're going to talk about when working with aggression. All of this material was written by Dr. Becky Bailey. You may have known her from the Conscious Discipline series. Fantastic stuff right there. And then we've just adapted it to an early education setting for us. All right, kind of going down here to our next slide that I want to talk about is that as a child, as an adult, we both deal with aggression the same way. When adrenaline kicks in, or when anxiety kicks in, we go into a fight or flight response, all right? Most of our normal thinking happens right here in the front part of our brain, the executive part of the brain. And this is where we make good decisions. This is where we have good judgment, is in the front part of our brain. When adrenaline kicks in, our brain downshifts into our unconscious brain, or what's also called the limbic system. When you downshift into your unconscious brain, I like to call that we lose common sense, all right? And I think that we've all been there as adults where we have gotten into a disagreement with someone, whether it be a spouse or a coworker or a boss, and when your brain downshifts into its unconscious brain, we say things that we don't mean, or we do things that we don't mean. And once you calm yourself down, you realize what you've done and you apologize. So that's what happens as we go into a fight or flight response. The other thing that we've got to keep in mind about how the brain is hardwired and how the downshifting affects aggression is that all of the experiences we go through life, from the time we're born until this moment right now, we have experiences. And all of those experiences are stored in the lower back part of the brain, kind of like your CD-ROM or your library that holds all of these experiences. Now, most of the time, you don't even realize they're there. They just sit there for years and years and years. They sit there. But what happens is when we go into a fight or flight response, when we downshift, we downshift into that unconscious brain, which also downshifts into our experiences. And this is where, like a great example of this is many of you have shared stories with me about when you were growing up, your mother or your father or your guardian used to say things or do things to you that you probably said, growing up, once I become a parent, I'm never going to say or I'm never going to do XYZ. Okay, we've all said that. And then now that we're parents and, and our children frustrate us or we get angry or the adrenaline starts flowing, the kids make us upset and we sit there and we start screaming, if you don't stop, I'm going to pull the car over and make you walk the rest of the way home. And as soon as it comes out of your mouth, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that. I said I would never say that. So that's what happens, is that when we go into our fight or flight and we downshift into our unconscious brain, boom, out comes your mother. Because those are all of the experiences that sit back there. So think about that with a child in your classroom. And when their adrenaline starts flowing, they downshift and they react based on their experiences. Now, as an educator, we've got to keep in mind that there's nothing we can do about experiences. What has happened to that child up until this point, there's absolutely nothing we can do about that. One of the biggest things that we have to focus on, especially when working with aggression, is that we have got to make sure that we provide that child with a lot of positive experiences, meaningful experiences, nurturing experiences, compassionate experiences. And the more of these type of things that we can provide that child and create, those experiences are also going to the lower back part of the brain where they will sit with all of the other experiences. So when the child does go into a fight or flight response, hopefully they will downshift into one of those positive, meaningful experiences rather than a negative experience. So when you're working with aggression, you want to fill that person, that child, that adult with as much meaningful positive experiences as possible. Now, rule number one when it comes to working with an aggressive individual is that you've got to unhook yourself, okay? You've got to learn not to take things personally. The aggressive act is not about you, it's about the child, okay? So a lot of times we hear teachers say things like, look what you're making me do. Look how you're making me act, all right? Listen to what you're making me say. And if you noticed in all of those examples, what did I constantly say over and over again? Me, 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 okay? You got to unhook yourself. It's not about you. Plus, when you say things like, look what you're making me do, look how you're making me feel, you're giving your power away, okay? And when you're working with an aggressive person, it's very important that you don't give your power away. You've got to stay assertive and in control. giving that power away. Many of y'all have worked in a 2-year-old classroom before. You give your power to a 2-year-old, they're going to take it and run with it. You say to a 2-year-old, you say to a 3-year-old, look how you're making me act. You're making me very sad. That 2-year-old's going to be like, woohoo, look what I'm making him feel. Awesome, let's see what else I can do. All right, so don't give away your power. The other thing we've got to realize with aggression is that, pain concentrates your consciousness in one area, and aggression stems from the perception of excessive pain. Now, keep in mind that pain is not just physical pain. That's the first thing we want to think of is physical pain. Yes, my pinky hurts, or my elbow hurts, or my leg hurts. And that could create an aggressive act. But we also have to look at mental pain. Okay, there could be mental scars that go on there. Again, negative experiences that the child is still trying to deal with, or that the child is still trying to understand. All right, and that aggression is going to stem from some of those situations. So if you're working with a child and you know that they've had some negative experiences in their past, we want to continue to talk about them and continue to have them express themselves in a way that they understand. And I want to throw a word of caution out there to you. One of the big mistakes that we make as early educators is that we try to manipulate the child into feeling what we think they need to feel. And we've got to stop doing that. All right? The child has a right to have feelings, okay? And we want them to express those feelings. And we want them to understand that it's okay to have these feelings. But we can't manipulate it, all right? And we've got to help the child understand their feelings and understand, if it's going to be better, understand how they can fix it, how we can fix it, more than just words. For example, I see this all the time in a 2-year-old or a toddler classroom, that mom drops off the baby in the classroom, and the child is crying and holding their arms up in the air, wanting their mama that just left to go to work. And I see the teacher sitting over on the circle time rug going, come on over here, Betsy, you're okay, stop crying. Well, obviously the child is not okay. Obviously the child is upset, the child is missing their mother, it's very confusing to them, but we're over here trying to tell her how to feel. Okay, we need to understand that the child does have, that loneliness, that they're still in that concrete thinking of when mom leaves, she's never coming back, and we've got to help them learn that. Okay, I had a situation with a little boy just recently that was throwing a tantrum, and when I went over to him, I got down at his eye level and I told him, I said, you're very upset, and that's okay. I said, you're very angry, and that's okay. It's okay for you to be angry. And afterwards, the teacher was telling me, Mr. Tim, it's not okay for him to be angry. And I said, yes, it is. It's okay for him to be angry. But one of the very first things that we had to do to deal with the aggression was to acknowledge his feelings. All right, it's okay for him to be angry. Now, it's not okay for him to hit the other children. It's not okay for him to flip over chairs. But it is okay for him to be angry. So let's not manipulate the kids right there. Let's have some empathy. All right. This kind of also leads to rule number one, or the number one successful belief that Dr. Bailey kind of presented to us. No child can make you angry without your permission. No child can make you sad without your permission. No child can make you upset, crazy, or happy. You've got to be in control. You've got to make sure that you don't give away your power. And we see this quite often when working in classrooms and with classroom management, that we tend to use ineffective speech with the children. When we say, don't you want Mr. Tim to be happy? Okay, Mr. Tim's going to be very upset if you don't pick up the blocks. I'm going to be so sad if you don't eat your green beans. Again, I'm giving away my power when I'm using that type of speech. Okay, you've got to be assertive. The number one problem with self-esteem in children Look at this. It's the lack of self-control in adults. You know, this is one of the 10 principles of discipline and guidance that we talk about quite often in our industry. One of the most important things that we have to realize is that we are role models to the children in our classrooms, especially when we're working with aggression. Okay? We don't want to model the very behavior that we're trying to eliminate. And I see this all the time when I walk into early childhood classrooms, that I see a teacher raising her voice. I see a teacher talking to children very, very aggressively. I see a teacher getting upset and kind of having her own little tantrum in the classroom. But then we get upset when the children do those things. One of the most important things that you can do when dealing with aggression, when dealing with classroom management, is that you've got to keep yourself in control. All right? Breathe, take a breath, do some active calming. Tell yourself, I am safe, I am okay, and I can handle this. All right? But so many times we see when working with aggression that the child is looking to us. They're looking at us for us to be that role model. It's kind of like the kid is saying, teacher, I have this issue going on inside of me and I don't know how to deal with it. Please help me. And they're looking at you for that guidance. But if you're also throwing the tantrum, if you're also getting upset, if you're, pulling the kid up to the office saying, hey, director, it's either him or me, then we're not giving the child that guidance. We're not being the role model that he's looking for us to be. All right? So you've got to have good control. Do we have difficult situations in the classroom? Absolutely, we have difficult situations. This is where active calming is going to be very important for us. Be a star and teach your children to be a star. Smile, take a breath, and relax. Okay? The way I like to interpret this also is to stop, take a breath, and relax. Use this in your circle time every single day when you have group time with your children. Talk about being a star. When someone does something around you that you don't like, whether it's a behavior, whether it's words, something that they're saying, or sometimes, with the weather outside, things that are out of our control, teach the children to be a star. Smile, take a breath, and relax. Or stop, take a breath, and relax. And you're going to find that this is very effective for you as an adult as well. Okay, when you're dealing with situations, there's nothing that says you have to talk about something right now. Okay, once you do your active calming, then you can go in and you can talk about the situation. And again, like I mentioned earlier, you got to use affirmations. I am safe, I can handle this, and keep breathing. And remember, the child is looking at you for you to be that role model. When they downshift into their fight or flight, they're looking at you. How's my teacher going to handle this situation? It's amazing that when you stay calm, okay, over the course of time, you'll see that they'll use active calming too. Let me just focus on this right here real quick, because that just brings up another point that is not really in my agenda, but I want to throw it out there. A lot of times when we talk about dealing with aggression and working with challenging behaviors, we tend to want an overnight fix. We tend to want a technique that will work the very first time. And I'm just going to tell you, folks, it's not out there. It's impossible, all right? There's no magic wand that will eliminate aggression and challenging acts. This is something that you're going to have to work with over and over and over and over again. It's going to take time to be able to get the child into that healthy self-esteem state. All right? There's a lot of unmet needs out there, and it's going to take time to get there. Now, for you as the caregiver, as the educator, I want you to keep in mind it's going to take time to eliminate this aggression, and it's going to take consistency. You've got to use the same techniques over and over and over again. I hear people say almost every single weekend, whenever I go out and do my weekend mini conferences, there's always someone that raises their hand and they say, I've tried everything with this kid. Okay, I've tried everything and nothing works. Well, my question back to you is, how long did you try it? Okay, because if you're constantly hopping from technique to technique to technique, and you're being very inconsistent in how you're handling the situations, you're right, nothing's going to work. You've got to be consistent with how you're handling it, and you've got to make a commitment to a certain technique that you will use over and over and over again. All right, and these techniques that we're going to talk about today, I guarantee you they work. All right. The other thing, whenever I have people that always raise their hand and they say, oh, I've tried everything, nothing works, the next thing I got to tell you, well, actually, this is the very first thing, you've got to change your attitude. You've got to have that determined attitude and that positive attitude that I'm going to work with this child, I'm going to work with this family, and we are going to meet that unmet need. You know, I don't look at challenging behaviors as obstacles. I look at challenging behaviors and I look at aggressive acts in the children as opportunities for us to make a difference. And that's exactly what the children and the adults need, is that they need us to be there for them and to take advantage of that opportunity. All right. The second successful belief is the motivation to behave comes from being in a relationship. Everything revolves around relationships, and I know that we've talked about this in previous trainings and previous webinars as well, as that the relationship building skills is the number one survival, or the very first survival skill that we learn as adults. Okay, always keep that in mind. And especially when we are in a situation nowadays where there's so many children, there's so many adults that are not forming relationships with each other because of outside voices or outside devices, such as screen time, and children being overexposed to screen time and adults being overexposed to screen time. It's preventing us from building those successful relationships. You know, I just talked about this on a training event that I was at this past weekend, that, you know, every child wants to be a pleaser. They really honestly want to please us. They just struggle at how to do that. You've got to reach the child before you can teach them, and you've got to have that meaningful relationship first. And that kind of takes us to rule number 2 on our 3 successful rules. It's called Let's Do Lunch, or connect with the child. Once you connect with an individual, whether it's a child, whether it's an adult, whether it's a coworker, your spouse, dealing with the aggression is a lot easier. And here's the thing that we've got to keep in mind, is that when we connect with each other, we have better trust and we have better respect. And you've got to have trust and respect before you can deal with these aggressive acts. So it's just spending good quality time with the child is going to help you tremendously right there. You can see the slide here. Connecting with children wires their brains for impulse control. Children need our presence, not our presence. There's a lot of scientific research out there that states 5 minutes of one-on-one time with each child in your classroom each day cuts down power struggles by 50%. That's just 5 short minutes a day that you spend one-on-one time with each child. Okay, that's amazing right there. And I don't know how many kids you have in your classroom, but I guarantee you can spend 5 minutes of one-on-one time with each child each day. See such a huge difference. We tend to only focus on 2 different children, either the challenging behaviors that are taking up a lot of our attention, or we tend to focus on the children that don't cause a lot of problems because they tend to become our favorites, quote unquote. All right, I just love Billy. He never gets in trouble. He never causes any problems. He just comes to work and he plays, or he comes to school and he plays. He's so awesome. So we spend a lot of time with that kid, and you should still do that. But a lot of times it's the kids in the middle that miss out on a whole lot. Your aggressive children, they do need a lot of attention. So, focus on those relationships, focus on those connections, and be there for the child. I can't stress that one enough when it comes to working with aggression, is that you've got to be both mentally and physically available for the child, or available to the child. All right? Successful belief number 3, there's only 2 states of being. All right? Whether you're an adult, whether you're a child, no matter what, you're either extending love or you're calling for love. You're either offering support or you're saying, hey, someone, I need help. All right? All the time. Okay? Those type of things. In a classroom setting, the child that is doing the activity, the child that is listening during circle time, the child that is eating their lunch, washing their hands, they're trying to please you. Okay? They're meeting the expectations. So they're extending their love. Where the child that's being aggressive, the child that's being defiant, the child that's being argumentative, that child is calling for help. Hey, I don't understand. I have an unmet need, and I need you to help me understand. That's what that child is saying. So think about this when it comes to behavior, all right? When a child is being disrespectful, when they're being defiant, are they being disrespectful or are they calling for help? All right? So again, we got to go back and we've got to look at perception. I use the positive energy formula written by John Gordon quite often in a lot of my trainings, and that's E plus P equals O. I'm going to type this down here in our chat section on our screen. So E plus P, E plus P equals O. All right? And that's the positive energy formula, and that stands for events plus perception equals outcome. And I'll type that up for you too. Events plus perception equals outcome. So anything that we're going through in life, okay, or anything that's going on in the classroom, you have an event, you have an incident, all right, your perception of what's going on, okay, is going to create the outcome. So if you have a child that's being aggressive in your classroom, and you're sitting there looking down at him going, I don't get paid enough money to deal with this. If you kick me, I'm out of here. Hey, director, it's either him or me. I wish they'd do something about you. And if you have that negative attitude, you're going to continue to get a negative outcome. But if you have this child that's throwing a tantrum in the classroom, and you look at that child and you say, wow, he has an unmet need. I'm going to be here for this child. I'm going to love this child. I'm going to work with him and his family. We're going to figure out what this unmet need is, and, I'm not going to give up. And if you have that positive, determined attitude, I promise you, you're going to have a positive outcome. Now, remember, it's not going to come instantly. It takes time, but it will eventually get there. And this works right here. And use E plus P equals O in all situations in your life. Like I said, dealing with your spouse, dealing with your boss, dealing with parents. It all comes down to attitude. Let me talk really quickly about attitude and passion for just a minute, and why it's so important when working with aggression. You know that when we have a feeling in our heart, and anytime we have a feeling in our heart, a legitimate feeling in our heart, that feeling travels to every cell in your body. And when it travels to every cell in your body, anyone standing within 10 feet of you can feel that. That's pretty awesome right there. All right? So when you're working with aggression and you've got these feelings in the heart, the kids pick up on that. They pick up on your dedication. They pick up on your positive attitude. They know you're not going to give up on them, and it makes a big difference. But it's got to come from the heart, all right? Because children can also smell fear. Same thing. If you've got fear in your heart, it travels to every cell in your body. Anyone standing within 10 feet of you will feel that fear as well. All right? So it does come down to those attitudes. Number 4 right here is every aggressive and negative act is a call for help. All right? The children need 3 very important things. They need structure, they need nurturing, and they need presence. Okay? Structure always comes first right here. Keep that in mind in any aggressive situation. Structure always comes first. Set clear limits on what you want the children to do and be very specific about this. A lot of things that I have observed in my observations, watching teachers work with aggressive children, is that we're not specific on what we need the children to do. All right? We also have to be reasonable. Okay, you think about the 3 R's. All right, are the expectations, are they reasonable? Are they respectful? And are they related? So those are the 3 R's to always keep in mind: reasonable, respected, and related. All right, so set those clear limits. Nurture the child. All right, accept them for who they are. It's just like the little boy I told you about earlier. He's very angry, and that's okay. It's okay for you to be angry. Accept them for who they are. Don't try to change them. Don't try to manipulate them. What we want to do is we want to meet the unmet need. All right, let them become who they are, supposed to become. And of course, your presence. All right, the decision and the willingness to bring the best of ourselves and the child in each moment. So when you're working with aggression, structure, set the limits and the expectations, nurturing, let them know that you love them and that you accept them for who they are, and be present. All right, let them know through the feelings in your heart that you're going to be there for them. All right, number 5 on the 7 successful beliefs. I think this is my favorite one out of all of them. There is no such thing as bad children. Okay, if we were in a classroom setting right now, I would have everyone in class repeat after me. There are no bad children. Okay, now there's also no good children either. There's no bad children. There's no good children. What we work with every single day in our environment, we work with children. So we've got to lose the labels. Okay. We've got to lose the labels, and we've got to stop stereotyping and judging children and other individuals in this sense. Let them be who they are. But what happens a lot of times is because, many of you that are on this webinar right now, you're going to say, oh, I am not going to go into a classroom and say, you're a bad kid, you're a bad kid, you're a bad kid. Of course you're not going to do that. You're going to lose your job if you do that. But how many people go into a classroom and they say, oh, you're a good kid. Oh, you're a good kid. You're a good kid. Well, if you have a teacher that, pinpoints 3 or 4 different children in the classroom and they say, you're a good kid, you're a good kid, you're a good kid, and they don't tell all the other children, what are their perceptions? Well, if I'm not a good kid, I must be a bad kid. All right? So we need to make sure that we all know that they're children, all right? And we accept them for who they are. So again, think of this in terms of behavior. Are they being helpful? Or again, I can't talk today, sorry. Are they calling for help? When you've got the children that are not meeting your expectations, that's a call for help right there. That's that need that's not being met. Number 6 is another really, really big one that we've got to make sure that we talk about right here. Children can only meet the needs of other children when their own needs have been met. Okay? Look at that one, read that one, and hear it once again. Children can only meet the needs of other children when their own needs have been met. So many times when we have children that have needs that are not met, we expect them to treat others in a positive way. Okay, and we get very frustrated when they don't do that. The way that child, the child that you're working with, the way they're treating the other children is a big indicator of the unmet need. Okay, so I want y'all to really go back into your classrooms and look at this right here. All right, the child that's causing you a lot of frustrations and a lot of challenges, whatever they're doing to other children is a big indicator of the need that's not being met. That right there tells you exactly where you need to go to help them out. All right, so keep that in mind right there. We've got to meet their needs. One of the best things to do with children in our early education setting is to create daily routine cards or pictorial directions. Remember at the beginning of the webinar, I told you that children do not have inner voices. All right, children do not have inner voices, so they don't have that thinking. They don't have that voice that's constantly coaching them, that voice that's reasoning with them like we do as adults. So that's why using real life pictures is really beneficial, because it helps take the pressure off of having to listen and understand words, but then also looking at a picture activates a different part of the brain. Because they have immature inner voices, and because the children can only see images, they're going to relate to pictorial instructions a lot better than they will verbal instructions. So daily routines, pictorial schedules, that's something that's really big with me in my schools. Health routines such as hand washing charts, eating, going to the restroom. If you have rules or expectations, having them in a picture form, responsibility cards, anything that you can do in your classroom and using real life pictures to show the child instructions is going to be helpful in these type of situations. And I also want y'all to keep in mind, depending on the age of the child that you're working with, not only the chronological age of the child you're working with, but the developmental age of the child. Their vision may not be fully developed, okay? Not only their vision of what they can and cannot see, but the distance that a child can see may not be fully developed. So the younger the child you're working with, or if you have a child that is lacking developmental needs, you need to have those real life pictures as large as possible. The mistake that I see in a lot of programs is that they will use, 4x8 or 5x7 or 4x6 or 5x7 pictures in a toddler or 2-year-old classroom. The kids cannot see those. So you need to have at least 8x10, 11x13 pictures so that the children can truly see what you're expecting them to do. All right. And again, keep in mind that if a child does not have a skill, traditional consequences do not work. All right. A positive and a negative option is not really a choice, but a manipulation. All right. When you say, Johnny, I need you to pick up blocks. Do you want to pick up the red blocks or the blue blocks? All right. That's kind of a manipulation right there. Now, that's a good approach to getting the child to work on self-help skills, is by using what I just did. But does the child understand picking up the blocks and putting them away? So before I use those options, I need you to pick up the blocks. Would you like to pick up the blue blocks or the red blocks? I need to first take a look, and do they have the skills and do they understand picking up the blocks and why we're doing that? Also keep in mind that Dr. Becky Bailey and her team has determined that it takes 2,000 times in context to learn a new skill. In our early education programs, whatever that may be, okay, Whatever skill that you're trying to teach them in your classroom, it takes 2,000 times in context. So you can't just show them or tell them one or two times. Okay? You're going to get very frustrated because they're not going to get it. All right, 2,000 times. And I want y'all again to read right here in context for them to learn a new skill. That's going to be a lot of practicing, a lot of practicing. The seven successful belief, number 7, is that all aggression stems from the perceived experience of excessive pain. And we mentioned this earlier in the webinar that aggression stems from the perception of pain. So it's going to come from that right there. We are all born with the essential energy and the power to signal the world to get our needs met. And remember, I told you earlier that forming relationships is the very first survival skill that we learn as humans. When a baby is first born, really the only thing it's able to do is cry. And the reason why a baby cries is to get its needs met. It's hungry, or it's dirty, or it's uncomfortable, or it's sleepy. The baby cries. They form a relationship with the caregiver, whether it be a parent or someone in our programs. We meet their needs. They're comfortable now. Okay, so that's where, again, that relationship building skill is very, very important. So our response to these signals is critical for the child's development. While we don't want to spoil the child, we have to be available to them so that they can build that trust. Okay, so important right there. Aggression becomes the language of power when a child's needs are not being met. So it's kind of like the icing on the cake, if you want to think about it. If I was a child, if I was an infant or a toddler, 2-year-old, and I had a need that was not being met, I cry because I'm trying to reach out to my caregivers, the people that I'm trying to trust and respect. Hey, I need some caring. I need some nurturing. I'm hungry. I'm dirty. I'm uncomfortable. All right. And when you reach out there and you reach out there and you reach out there and nothing ever happens, that's when the aggressive act comes about. All right. So think about that with your children that you're working with now. How did they get up to the point where they're at right now? Where did we miss out on meeting those needs, whether us or the parent or whomever it may be? But it gradually got to the point where it's at now. They didn't get there overnight. Now, like I said earlier at the beginning of the webinar, we all have aggression, okay? Every single one of us, most of us are able to regulate this. We don't want to stomp this completely out. Aggression is an energy that sits inside of us. It's an amazing amount of energy. All right? We don't want to stomp this out. We want to transform it. We want to transform it into positive and compassionate and meaningful things rather than negative things. You know, I just spent a lot of time this past weekend working with a group on social media and outside voices and those type of things. And when we see on the internet all of the negativity of people constantly complaining about this or that, or how unhappy they are, or how horrible this world is, or McDonald's always forgets my French fries, or whatever it may be, you know, I want you to imagine for just a moment if you took all of that energy that is spent complaining, and imagine what this world would be like if we could transform that into positive comments and positive energy and positive actions. And if we could take all of that fear and anger and aggression and turn it into love, could you imagine what the world would be like? Could you imagine what your classroom would be like? It's pretty awesome right there. It's pretty amazing. All right. Rule number 3, when we go back to our 3 rules, always victim first. All right. We get more of the behaviors that we focus on. A lot of times when you've got an aggressive act in the classroom, it's because the aggressor is trying to get attention. And whenever you have, for example, a kid that bites in the classroom, we immediately want to run over to the biter. You know, what's wrong with you? You bit again. I've told you 1,000 times you can't bite your friends, you know. While the whole time Sally's over here holding her arm and she's crying. Oh, suck it up. I'll get with you in just a minute. All right. And we're still focusing on the biter. We're basically giving that child exactly what he was asking for, attention. And even though it's negative attention, it's still attention. And for some of our kids, beggars can't be choosers. I'll take attention any way I can get it. And a lot of our kids have become addicted to negative attention. All right. So that's where, again, rule number 3, victim first, aggressor second. All right. Sally got bit on the arm. We're going to go over there to Sally. Sally, something happened. You're holding your arm. Your face is red. You've got tears running down. You know, what happened? And she's going to say, Johnny bit me. Oh my goodness, Johnny did bite you. Let's get you cleaned up. Let's get you some first aid. Let's get you some ice. All right. And once you get the victim taken care of, then we deal with the aggressor. But it's quite amazing whenever you follow this approach. And I've gone in and I've tried this out many, many times, and I've used this approach in the classroom for many, many years, and it's fantastic. It's amazing that when you have an aggressor that does something, whether it's a bite or a hit or whatever, and you do victim first, aggressor second, as you're caring for the victim, you will see the aggressor watch you very intensely. And sometimes the aggressor will even try to get in between you and the victim. It's kind of like they're saying, hey, me, over here, look at me. I'm the one that bit, not her, you know? So it's quite fascinating to see how the aggressor reacts to you doing victim first, aggressor second. And that's where, again, we've got to empower our victims to kind of stand up for themselves. And that's why if Johnny bit Sally, and if I was the teacher, and if I were to say, Johnny, Sally doesn't like it when you bite her. Biting hurts. If I'm the one telling Johnny this, how do I know? You know, I'm not the one that got bit. How do I know it hurts? How do I know Sally doesn't like it? I don't. So, you know, as far as Johnny, the aggressor, is concerned, I'm just making all this stuff up. So we've got to empower the victim, okay? Sally, the kid that got bitten on the arm, has to be the one to tell Johnny, Johnny, I don't bite me. Biting hurts. He's going to understand it when it comes from the victim. Now, a lot of times people will ask me, what about nonverbal children? You can still practice empowerment and you can still practice assertiveness with nonverbal children, and you're going to have to coach them a little bit more. And at that point, you can be the voice for the child, but you want to be right there basically standing behind the child, but you want them to try to express their feelings first. All right? Once you can get the child to where they can say it, it's amazing how well this works. So again, kind of like what I just described, state what you see, something happened, reflect back on what you hear. You know, something happened, she's holding her arms, her face is red, she's crying. All right, she got bit. Now, when Sally comes back and she says, Johnny, I don't like it when you bite me. Biting hurts. All right? I'm going to then look at Johnny and say, Johnny, I'm here to make sure you listen to Sally. And that's going to be my role right there. All right? Very good. Addressing aggression right here. You may not hurt each other with words or actions. This is kind of the bully approach right there. And I want to really quickly, before we run out of time, I want to talk about the 3 different types of aggression that we deal with in our early education programs. Right here on the screen now, you will see the 3 different types. You've got accidental aggression, instrumental aggression, and hostile aggression. All right. Of course, you always want to restore safety first, and then build and strengthen your relationships. Accidental aggression is one of the most common types of aggression that we see in, you know, a toddler, 2-year-old classrooms. This is unintentional aggression. Okay, children under the age of 7, they do not understand accidental aggression. This would be your situation where you're lining up for lunch or you're lining up to go outside, and a child accidentally bumps into another child. And of course, whoever got bumped into is going to turn around. Johnny's pushing me. Johnny hit me. And he really didn't push or hit. He just accidentally bumped into them. So this again is where we're going to talk a lot about action reaction. We're going to talk about body awareness. We're going to talk about space around us. And then also with the person that got bumped into, talk about, what is intentional, what is unintentional, what is an accident? Does the child truly understand what accident means? All right. And of course, we want to teach empathy to both of the children involved. The one that created the accident, the one that was involved in the accident. All right. I'm going to skip past those right there. And then we're going to go on to instrumental aggression. Now, this starts around 18 months and it peaks at 4 years of age. This is the number one type of aggression that we deal with in our early education programs. This is where the child is trying to get something. All right, they are being aggressive because there's a need that's not being met and they're trying to get something out of it. All right, so again, victim first rule. All right, you seem upset, something happened. Did you like it? Go tell Johnny, I don't like it when you bite me. Kind of what we discussed earlier. All right, we'll kind of go through addressing the aggressor when the child does not have the necessary skills. We're going to use problem solving right here. For example, you wanted the toy fire truck. All right, so again, I'm showing that this builds security. They wanted the toy fire truck, so I understand them. All right, you wanted the toy fire truck, so you push Sally down. All right, building that awareness right there, that consciousness. You didn't know the words to use, did you? All right, by saying you didn't know what words to use, did you? That's going to keep that child from downshifting out of that frontal lobe into that fight or flight response. All right, well, you may not push, okay? Pushing Sally down hurts, so I'm going to set my limits. What else could I do? When you want the toy, you could ask or you could say, may I play with the toy next? Or is there another toy that I can play with? So we're going to teach them what they can do. Now, steps number 6 is the item that we tend to forget about quite often. Now, repeat after me. Let's say it together for practice. Okay, so make sure you repeat the 6 steps so that you can practice it and the kid understands. Now, if you do need to impose consequences, I mentioned this earlier, the 3 R's. Make sure that your consequences are reasonable, they're respectful, and they're related. All right. If Johnny pushes Sally down and takes away the toy fire truck, all right, you're going to lose all of your outside time for the rest of the week. All right. Now, taking away his outside time for the rest of the week, is that reasonable? No, it is not reasonable at all. All right. Is, taking away his outside time for the rest of the week, is it respectful? No, because it's going to put a spotlight on him. He's being shamed. The other children are going to notice that that's been done. And then him taking the toy away from the little girl is taking away his outside time related to the incident. No, it's not. So in this case, where Johnny takes the fire truck away from Sally, a reasonable, respectful, and related consequence is that Johnny will not be able to play with the fire truck for the rest of the morning. That would meet all of the 3 R's right there. Now, the last aggressive act that we talk about is hostile aggression. All right, now this is the bad, bad, bad stuff. A lot of times people want to get instrumental and hostile aggression confused, and they want to link them together. There's a big difference between the two. Most of what we deal with is instrumental aggression. The child is trying to get a need met. Hostile aggression would be your worst case scenarios right there, right here, where problem solving, conflict resolution techniques, and consequences just are not being effective in these type of situations. And a hostile, aggressive state, the children have experienced a great deal of pain. They see the world as attacking, so they begin to attack first. So they're constantly in that fight or flight response, all right? But they're fighting, all right? These kids have a lot of unmet needs. A hurtful child is fearful, anxious, highly stressed, and they're calling out for help. When you've got a hostile, aggressive situation, you need to come in with structure, nurture, and presence. And like I said, structure always comes first. We talked about aggression causes downshifting. We start in the executive state, we go to the emotional state, we then downshift into the survival state. That's that limbic system where all of our experiences sit. When you've got a hostile, aggressive state, or you've got a hostile, aggressive child, really focus on those experiences, and we want to try to layer in more positive experiences for that individual. All right, counteract downshifting, do that active calming, be a star, build up their emotions. There's a lot of studies out there that children with a high self-esteem are less likely to be aggressive. So the higher you can build their self-confidence, the better off you're going to be right there. And remember that all anger is fear in disguise. All right? Anger is fear in disguise. So when you see an angry child in the classroom, there's something that they're afraid of. One of the best things that you can tell a fearful child is that you are there for them, you are there to protect them, and you're not going to let anything happen to them. So when that child is throwing a tantrum, when they're in a hostile, aggressive state, rather than you getting upset with them, okay, you need to get down at their eye level and say, I love you, I'm not going to let anything happen to you, I'm going to make sure that you're safe. All right? Once you get them once you practice active calming, once you get them out of their fight or flight response, you're going to be able to have meaningful conversations. But with the hostile, aggressive child, they need to know that they are safe. All right. Awesome, everybody. Our 1 hour is up. The computer is going to cut us off here in just a little bit. So I hope that we covered a lot of really good information today. You are welcome to email me with any questions that you have about the material today. Like I said, this is normally a 6-hour training that I cut down to 1 hour, so I did not cover everything that we normally cover. But you can catch me at one of my weekend mini conferences, or I do have a DVD coming out soon on this particular subject. All right. I hope everyone enjoyed themselves, and I will see everyone on a future Tuesday webinar. Thank you very much.